The Russian government is rolling out a massive new tax on Russian citizens to fund their war in Ukraine. Just why is this the worst possible move for the Russian economy, but maybe the only option left for Vladimir Putin? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Hit that subscribe, guys. And of course, if you want to help us out, become a member over on Combat Vet News. That makes a huge difference for the channel. Now, this is actually pretty crazy. Now, this is reported by a number of outlets, but I think Meduza, the Russian opposition outlet, makes some of the most succinct analysis. This is according to the 2026 federal budget by the Russian Finance Ministry, and stating that the Russian government is going to be raising their general value add tax from 20 to 22%. Now, this sounds like not that much, but remember, this is a 10% increase on one of the most pervasive taxes in a place like Russia. Value add tax, if you're an American, you may not understand, but this is a tax that shows up in the transaction between every single good and service. So this 2% hike is, or rather it's a 10% hike in a tax that shows up in almost every single transaction. It's sometimes done in lieu of or in addition to an income tax. And this significant tax hike, Russia is explicit that it is funding the defense and security expenditures of the Russian government, i.e. the war in Ukraine. Now, Russian officials repeatedly claim, of course, they're not going to raise taxes, but they're not a democratically elected government, so they don't really have any obligation to adhere to their word. In fact, they have an obligation, or their best strategy is often to lie to the public. And we're going to roll out the Russian lies here in a second. But a Russian government source in August told Reuters that raising taxes was, quote, unavoidable. And this is the reality, because the Russian state, they cannot take out sovereign debt at any kind of reasonable interest rate to fund their war effort. No one's buying the debt. And so they also cannot rely on oil and gas revenues because, one, the pervasive strikes against the Russian refineries have diminished Russia's ability to produce its most valuable oil and gas products, right? Finished petroleum, finished gasoline, finished motor fuel, finished things like butane and other sort of end-use products that don't require additional processing. That is much more valuable and much more sellable than unrefined oil and gas. But with those refineries taken out, in fact, not only can Russia not export these products, but Russia can't even get enough to fuel its own gas stations. Russians are reportedly seeing gas stations across the country now running out of fuel entirely. And so that option is off the table, in addition to, of course, additional sanctions. And the only options left at this point, there's no debt, there's no sale of oil and gas, that leaves simply taxing Russian citizens. But the problem is that Russian citizens in many ways are already taxed to the brink by the war in Ukraine, because there is effectively a labor tax, being as military-aged men, fit working-age men are being pulled out of the labor force and sent to the front lines, right? This, of course, is creating a sort of labor tax, making it harder to find good workers, particularly in kind of male-dominated industries like mining, logging, agriculture. You also have and of course, oil and gas. You also have the tax of high interest rates, right? As Russia has tried to combat the inflation caused by sanctions, the Russian central bank has risen interest rates to a level that would be economy destroying in a stable Western private economy like the United States or the UK. We're looking at interest rates in the 20% range for private businesses. So for those businesses, again, you have to think that almost every business of any size and substance is going to be taking out loans. If you're a baker, you buy the flour today for bread you will sell tomorrow. And to get the money to buy that flour today, you have to rely on loans. So every single Russian business of any size is reliant on these loans. And so you see how if you're a business getting hit with all this and then being told, hey, by the way, your value add tax, which you might pay several times in the course of a transaction, is going to be, or in the course of selling something, is going to also be hiked 10%. This is absolutely so difficult, right? The VAT is an indirect tax levied on all goods and services. Consumer pays this invisible fee when they make a purchase, and the seller acts as intermediary and transfers the tax payment to the government. VAT is a convenient fiscal instrument for replenishing a country's treasury. It's a difficult tax code to evade, and revenues from it flow into the government's coffers revenue and predictably, right? This would generate about 1 trillion rubles a year, but 0.5% of Russian GDP, which, by the way, guys, that's extracting 0.5% of GDP out of an economy that's growing zero. And this is something that, again, is going to be wildly unpopular with Russians, the Russian public, which Putin doesn't particularly care about one way or another. But it's going to be even less liked by Russian oligarchs, who, remember, are subject to these VAT taxes in a significant way. For example, again, you can see it's almost fascinating to see how this is being spun by the Russian propaganda universe, right? In which here's one Russian, all Russian media is state media, in effect, right? Think of them all as being Fox News. They might be for-profit enterprises, but they never operate in defiance of the state and the government. They roll out the fact that the budget has priorities, and they talk about a lot of these social programs. That's because one of Putin's most important bases of support is literally people on the dole, retirees on pensions, individuals with disabilities receive regular payments from the government, and they in turn support the current government, right? Right or wrong, if those checks clear, these people are pro-Putin. And so they say, oh, well, we're going to raise the VAT tax by 2%, and then they sort of juxtaposed it against other things, right? They say, look, we're doing all these other programs, strengthening defense, supporting social programs. Oh yeah, and we're gonna support people who participate in the special military operation. Brilliant stuff. And we're also gonna fund a maternity hospital. But here's what I think is important to acknowledge is that when you list priorities, it's a little bit like the old meme that goes around Twitter when people say, how do I budget? And they say rent $600, food $300, Warhammer 40,000 collectible figurines $3,000. They go, I can't figure out what's wrong with my budget. Can someone help? Well, this is that meme come to life where Russia goes, yeah, guys, social programs, 300 rubles, supporting participants in the special military operation and strengthening defense. 3 million rubles. Funding maternity capital programs, 250 rubles. Achieving technological leadership in drone warfare, 3,000 rubles. School and kindergarten renovations, 100 rubles. Guys, how do I budget? And this is, of course, the SPIN program, right? They say the budget's going to be strongly oriented toward social programs, which is not the same thing as a real commitment. Of course, they say the armed forces will receive full funding. And this is just classic, right? And this is something that even politicians in the West do. Well, they'll say, listen, we're going to double the budget for school renovations from $1 to $2. And we're going to make sure the armed forces get a 2% budget increase, which in the United States is like $60 to $70 billion. That's a pretty standard politician rollout. But the fact is that it's a sign about the Russian government's weakness that they have to roll out these kind of brazen lies to their people. Because, again, if you're the average Russian pensioner, you are feeling the pain right now. Gas is expensive. It's in short supply. Food is very expensive, and you're seeing more and more unemployment. So if you're an old woman, maybe the son or daughter you depended on who is your caretaker or literally might be supplementing your pension, that's going away. And while this is not the most important source of Vladimir Putin's power, right, his most important source is the loyal oligarchy who sits atop institutions like the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Defense, and also sits atop industries like Gazprom or Rusatom or Rusnickel. And these individuals are the ones whose well-being must be protected at all costs, because they can actually pose an imminent threat to the Russian government. But still, the popular support of a broad base of people who are on the government dole, that also is something Putin realizes he can't neglect. And the fact that they're already starting to feel punished and pushed is a bad sign for the Russians. Now, guys, hit that subscribe button, but also more importantly, if you want to help out the Ukrainian units that are holding the line in places like Kramatorsk, Ukraine Aid Ops has their latest fundraiser for units that I have personally met in a lot of cases that are holding the line in the east. The 93rd, again, I've been inside of 93rd Drone headquarters. These are some of the best. Liu, of course, and Azov 79th Special Operations Forces that I've also met on several occasions. These guys are the real deal, and we are giving them exactly what they need, right? Straight from them. They say we need drones, we need power stations, we need antennas. In fact, one of the guys from Liu actually sent me at least 4 videos of them taking out Russian loitering munitions like Gerberas and Lancets using an antenna that we bought them. So if you want to help us out, the link is in the description. Thanks to all you guys that have done so. And of course, if you want to help me out, my content has been a lot more politically charged and a lot of advertisers don't want to touch me at all. But I don't care because you guys have my back. On Combat Vet News, you can also see, even if you're not a member, you can at least see every video that drops. So even if YouTube's algorithm mysteriously spikes, for example, my video about TikTok, Trump allies being essentially gifted TikTok in a closed door deal, the algorithm didn't show that to that many people. Weird, right? But you can check it out there. And of course, if you become a member, you can support me and the team financially, enabling us to do this until the government says I have to stop. Anyway, thanks to our Colonel tier members, guys like Paul Wheeler, Michael Colleen, Jeff Davies, Francis Carius, Thomas Anderson, Gina Cuesta, as well as all of our lieutenant tier folks. You guys make this possible. I thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.